What happens when a Hollywood legend walks onto a talk show set expecting respect and walks out becoming a symbol of standing up to media arrogance? In just 33 seconds, one dismissive comment from Joy Behar would ignite a firestorm that turned a routine interview into the most talked about moment in daytime television history. The View studio audience settled into their seats that morning with no idea they were about to witness something unforgettable. Sylvester Stallone, the man who gave us Rocky Balboa and John Rambo, sat down across from the panel of hosts with that familiar confident smile. He was there to promote his latest project. But what started as typical celebrity small talk was about to take a turn nobody saw coming. Whoopi Goldberg opened with the usual pleasantry. "Sly, it's so great to have you here. You look fantastic." Stallone nodded graciously. "Thank you. It's good to be here. I've always enjoyed coming on the show." The conversation flowed smoothly for the first few minutes. They discussed his workout routine, his family, and his upcoming film. Stallone spoke with genuine warmth about his career and the passion he still felt for his craft after all these years in the business. The audience laughed at his stories and applauded his humble reflections on success. Then Joy Behar leaned forward with that look in her eyes. Anyone who watched the show regularly knew that look. It meant she was about to say something provocative. "So Sly," she began, her tone shifting, "you've played a lot of tough guys over the years. All that punching, shooting, the muscles. Do you ever think maybe those kinds of movies are part of the problem? You know, glorifying violence and toxic masculinity?" The studio went quiet. Stallone's smile faded slightly, but he maintained his composure. "Well, Joy, I think my movies have always been about more than just action. Rocky was about perseverance in the human spirit. Rambo was about a veteran struggling to find his place after war. There's always been substance beneath the surface." Behar waved her hand dismissively. "Sure, but let's be honest. You made millions teaching young boys that the way to solve problems is with their fists. Don't you think that's irresponsible?" You could feel the tension building. Stallone shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening just a bit. "I think that's a pretty unfair characterization of my work. These characters faced impossible odds and fought for what they believed in. They inspired people." "Inspired people to be violent?" Behar interrupted, talking over him. "I mean, come on. You can't seriously sit here and tell me that movies where the hero beats everyone up are sending a positive message." Stallone took a breath, clearly trying to stay patient. "Joy, with respect, I think you're missing the point entirely. Rocky loses in the first film. It's not about winning through violence. It's about having the courage to stand up and go the distance." Behar laughed, and it wasn't a friendly laugh. "Oh please, that's just Hollywood spin. You made violent movies, got rich, and now you want to pretend they were art films." The other host looked uncomfortable. Whoopi tried to interject. "Well, I think there's definitely artistic merit in," but Behar wasn't done. "And another thing, Sly, these action heroes you play, they're all the same. Sweaty guys with guns who never talk about their feelings. Is that really what we should be showing people, especially now?" Stallone's eyes narrowed. His voice remained steady, but there was steel in it now. "Joy, I've spent over 40 years in this industry. I've poured my heart and soul into characters that mean something to millions of people around the world. Characters that my own life experiences shaped. I grew up struggling, fighting to make something of myself. Those stories are real to me. But they're not real." Behar shot back. "They're fantasies for men who want to feel tough without actually doing anything meaningful." That comment landed like a bomb. You could see Stallone's expression change. The politeness was draining away, replaced by something harder. "Excuse me," he said quietly. Behar, seemingly oblivious to the line she just crossed, kept going. "I'm just saying, maybe if you'd made movies about talking through problems or understanding different perspectives, instead of just punching them, we'd be in a better place as a society." Stallone stared at her for a long moment. "You think my work hasn't meant anything meaningful?" "I think it's meant a lot to your bank account," Behar said with a smirk. The audience gasped. Even the other hosts looked shocked. Sunny host's mouth fell open. Sarah Haynes looked down at her cards, clearly uncomfortable. Stallone sat back in his chair, and for a few seconds he just looked at Behar with an expression that was hard to read. Then he leaned forward. "Let me tell you something, Joy," he began, his voice low and controlled. "Before Rocky, I was sleeping in a bus station. I had 33 in my bank account. I wrote that screenplay in 3 days because I had a story burning inside me that I needed to tell. A story about a nobody who got a shot at something bigger than himself. Not because he was the strongest or the smartest, but because he had heart." Behar opened her mouth to respond, but Stallone raised his hand. "No, you've talked. Now I'm going to talk. I turned down 3 to 50,000 because the studio wanted to make that movie without me starring in it. I believed in that character so much that I risked everything. And you know what? That film gave hope to people. Real people going through real struggles. I've had firefighters, teachers, construction workers, single mothers come up to me in tears telling me that Rocky inspired them to keep going when they wanted to give up." His voice was rising now, passion pouring through every word. "You sit here on your talk show in your comfortable chair and you judge my life's work like it's nothing, like it's just mindless violence. You have no idea what those films meant to people. You have no idea what they meant to me." Behar tried to cut in. "Sly, I didn't mean." "Yes, you did." Stallone interrupted, firmly. "You absolutely meant it. And you know what the saddest part is? You don't even see how disrespectful you're being. I came here today as a guest. I came here to have a conversation. Instead, you've spent the last 5 minutes insulting my career, my choices, and basically telling me and everyone who loves my films that we're the problem with society. The studio was dead silent. Every eye was on Stallone. I've been in this business long enough to handle criticism, he continued. I've had plenty of it over the years, but there's a difference between criticism and contempt. What you're showing right now is contempt. Not just for me, but for everyone who found something valuable in the stories I told. Behar's face had gone red. Now wait just a minute, I have every right to my opinion about, and I have every right to mine. Stallone cut her off, his voice like granite. My opinion is that you're being incredibly rude and condescending. You invited me here. You asked me to come on your show, and this is how you treat a guest. Whoopi tried again to calm things down. Sly, I think maybe we can, but Stallone was standing up now, unclipping his microphone. The audience sat frozen, watching this unfold in real time. You know what, Joy? Stallone said, looking directly at her. You want to talk about toxic masculinity? Let's talk about toxic behavior in general. Sitting there acting superior, mocking someone's life work to their face, dismissing decades of effort as just making violent movies for money. That's toxic. That's the kind of behavior that shuts down real conversation. Behar stood up too defensive now. I was asking legitimate questions about the content of your films and their impact. No, Stallone interrupted sharply. You weren't asking questions. You were making accusations disguised as questions. There's a difference. A question would be, hey Sly, how do you respond to critics who worry about violence in media? An accusation is saying, I got rich teaching boys to solve problems with their fists. You weren't interested in my answer. You just wanted to make your point and put me in my place. The camera operators didn't know where to look. The producers in the control room were probably losing their minds. Every single film I've made, Stallone continued, his voice thick with emotion now, I made with purpose, with intention. Rocky wasn't about violence, it was about dignity, about proving to yourself that you belong in the ring with the best, even if you lose. Rambo wasn't about glorifying war. It was about the cost of war, about men who come home broken and forgotten. But you don't care about any of that, do you? Behar crossed her arms. I care about the message that gets sent to audiences. You care about sounding smart and progressive on television. Stallone shot back. You care about getting your talking points in and feeling morally superior, but you don't actually care about understanding what these stories mean to people. The other host sat frozen. This had gone so far beyond a normal disagreement. Stallone shook his head slowly. I've met people from every walk of life who told me my films helped them. Veterans with PTSD who saw themselves in Rambo. Kids from rough neighborhoods who saw themselves in Rocky. People fighting cancer who found strength in those characters. And you want to reduce all of that to toxic masculinity and violence. Those are valid concerns about media influence, Behar insisted. But her voice had less certainty now. They would be if you expressed them with any respect or nuance, Stallone countered. But you didn't. You went straight to judgment and mockery. You know what I think? I think you don't actually have a problem with violence in movies. You have a problem with the kind of movies I make. The kind that appeal to working class people. The kind that celebrate underdogs and fighters and people who don't quit. That hit a nerve. Behar's eyes flashed. That is completely unfair. Is it? Stallone challenged. Because from where I'm standing it seems pretty accurate. You sit up here in your bubble and you look down on the things regular people connect with. You decide what's worthy and what's not based on your own narrow worldview. The audience was riveting between them like watching a tennis match. I have spent my entire career, Behar said, her voice rising, advocating for important social issues and asking tough questions. Asking tough questions is fine. Stallone cut in. Being disrespectful isn't. And you've been disrespectful from the moment you started talking to me. Maybe you can't see it because you're so used to being able to say whatever you want without consequences, but I see it. The audience sees it. Your own co-hosts look uncomfortable. Sonny and Sarah both looked away quickly. Stallone held up the microphone he'd unclipped. You know what the real problem is, Joy? It's not violent movies. It's people who think they're better than everyone else. People who think their opinions are facts, and anyone who disagrees is just ignorant or problematic. That's what shuts down real dialogue. That's what divides people. He set the microphone down on the table with a decisive thud. I came here today in good faith, he said, his voice quieter now, but no less intense. I came here to talk about my work, to connect with your audience, to have a good time. Instead, I got ambushed by someone who clearly decided before I even sat down that she was going to take shots at me. Well, congratulations, Joy, you got your moment. You got to publicly tear down someone's life work on national television. I hope it was worth it. Behar's face was bright red. Now you're being incredibly dramatic, and you're being incredibly dismissive. Stallone fired back immediately. Even now, even after everything I just said, you're still dismissing me. You can't even acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, you crossed the line. That's the problem. Right there. He looked around at the other hosts, then out at the audience. I've been doing this for a long time, Stallone said, his voice carrying across the studio. I've been on hundreds of talk shows. I've answered thousands of questions, some tough, some easy, some in between, but I've never been treated with such open disdain as a guest. It's disappointing. It's really disappointing. Whoopi finally found her voice. Sly, please, maybe we can take a breath. And I've taken plenty of breaths. Whoopi, Stallone said, not unkindly. And I appreciate you trying to smooth this over, but some things can't be smoothed over. Some things need to be called out, and what just happened here needed to be called out. He looked back at Behar, who was still standing there with her arms crossed, defiant. "You owe me an apology," Stallone said flatly. "Not for having an opinion about my movies. You're entitled to that. But for the way you expressed it, for the mockery and the condescension and the complete lack of respect." The studio held its collective breath. Every single person was waiting to see what Behar would do. The cameras were tight on her face. She didn't apologize. Instead, she lifted her chin and said, "I was doing my job. Asking challenging questions is what I do." Stallone stared at her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Okay. Well then I'm doing mine. I'm standing up for myself, and for my work, and for everyone who ever connected with my films, and I'm walking out of here with my dignity intact." He turned to leave, then paused and looked back. "And you know what the difference is between Rocky and what just happened here?" he asked. Rocky knew when he was outmatched, but he got in the ring anyway because it mattered. He took his punches and he kept going. Not because he was violent or toxic, but because he believed in himself. That's the message of that film. Believe in yourself even when others don't. Stand up for what matters even when it's hard. His eyes swept across the panel one more time. "I believed in myself enough to turn down hundreds of thousands of dollars so I could tell that story my way. I believed in it when everyone said it wouldn't work. And I'm believing in myself right now when I say that I don't have to sit here and take this. Nobody does." With that, Sylvester. Stallone walked off the view set, leaving behind a stunned audience, speechless hosts, and one very flustered Joy Behar. The cameras kept rolling as he disappeared through the stage exit. Whoopi tried to cut to commercial, her voice shaky. "We'll be right back after." But nobody was paying attention to her words. They were all still processing what they just witnessed. A guest standing up. A guest refusing to be diminished. A guest choosing his self-respect over playing nice for the cameras. In the audience, some people started clapping, just a few at first, then more, then even more. Within seconds, half the audience was on their feet applauding Stallone's exit. The other half sat in shocked silence, unsure how to react to this unprecedented moment. Behar stood at the table, her face a mixture of anger and embarrassment. She tried to speak, tried to say something to regain control, but her voice was drowned out by the applause. Backstage, producers scrambled. This wasn't in the script. This wasn't how interviews were supposed to go, but it had happened. Live on air, unfiltered and raw. Stallone walked through the backstage area with his head high. Production assistants and crew members stared as he passed. Some looked sympathetic, others looked thrilled. One young stagehand actually gave him a thumbs up. His publicist rushed up to him, phone already pressed to her ear, undoubtedly dealing with the immediate fallout. But Stallone barely acknowledged her. He just kept walking steady and sure, the way Rocky walked through those Philadelphia streets. Back on set, the show cut to commercial. During the break, Behar sat down heavily in her chair. The other hosts exchanged glances, unsure what to say. What could they say? The explosion they'd all just witnessed wasn't something you could simply move past with a quick topic change. When they came back from commercial, Whoopi tried to address what had happened. Well, that got heated. "We want to thank Sylvester Stallone for stopping by," but it sounded hollow. Everyone knew what had really happened. Everyone knew that this wasn't just a disagreement that got a little tense. This was a complete breakdown of the normal talk show dynamic. A guest had called out a host on her own show. He'd stood up, spoken his piece, and walked out on his own terms. Behar, for her part, tried to justify herself. "Look, I ask tough questions. That's what I do. If people can't handle that," but even as she spoke, you could see it in her eyes. She knew it had gone too far. She knew she'd pushed too hard, been too dismissive, too mocking. She'd treated a guest with contempt, and it had backfired spectacularly. The rest of the show limped along, but nobody was really paying attention anymore. The Stallone walkout was all anyone could think about. In the control room, producers were already fielding calls from media outlets wanting comments. Social media was exploding with reactions. What Behar had intended as a moment to challenge Stallone on his movies had instead become a moment where she got challenged herself on her own show in front of her own audience. And unlike Rocky in that first film, she hadn't gone the distance. She'd been knocked down and had stayed down. Stallone, meanwhile, left the building and climbed into his waiting car. As it pulled away from the studio, he looked out the window at the New York streets. He'd stood up for himself. He defended his work and his legacy. He'd refused to be talked down to or dismissed. It wasn't how he'd planned to spend his morning. But sometimes the most important moments are the unplanned ones. The ones where you have to make a choice about what you'll accept and what you won't. About whether you'll stay seated and take it or stand up and speak your truth. The audience that had watched it all unfold would never forget it. The hosts who'd sat frozen at the table would replay it in their minds for days. And Joy Behar, sitting in her chair as they wrapped the show, knew that what had started as her trying to put a guest in his place had ended with her being the one who looked foolish. Stallone didn't need to throw a punch to win. He just needed to stand up, speak his truth, and walk away. Sometimes that's the most powerful statement you can make. Sometimes that's how you go the distance. Not by staying in a fight that doesn't deserve your energy, but by choosing yourself and walking out the door. And as the studio lights dimmed and the cameras stopped rolling, one thing was absolutely clear. Sylvester Stallone had walked onto that set as a guest and walked off as something more. A reminder that respect matters, that dignity matters, that you don't have to accept being talked down to, no matter who's doing the talking or how big their platform is. It was a moment that transcended the usual talk show drama. It was real, it was raw. It was a man standing up for his life's work and refusing to be diminished. And millions of people who saw it or heard about it understood exactly why he did it. Because sometimes when someone crosses that line, the only response is to stand up, say your piece, and walk away knowing you did the right